finger at everyone else as opposed to actually leading and delivering for a city that is the heartbeat of this state. Just as he's done in the past, today's press conference was a political stunt with no basis whatsoever to call me or my office out. I want to be clear that as state's attorney for Baltimore City, I've never said that I would not prosecute violent offenders or violent crime in the city of Baltimore. Every day, my talented prosecutors, which are being recruited by others, including the Attorney General and other counties all across the state, are committed to working with the Baltimore Police Department to ensure accountability against individuals that wreak havoc in our communities. Had the governor set aside his philosophical differences and chosen to meet or even to talk to me, I would have been happy to show him the data that he's now making contingent on my office's funding. In fact, a great deal of the information that the governor is seeking is already published on my website. We went through this same unproductive exchange and exercise 2 years ago when my office debunked the misinformation that the governor was perpetuating in our letter to the Senate President Ferguson. And now, coming out of a global pandemic where the courts have literally been non-operational for a year and a half, in the past 6 months, my prosecutors are diligently working through the massive case backlogs, and yet they are still producing. To date, our data, which we publish every month on our website, since the reopening of the courts just this year, my office has had an overall 97% conviction rate. Our homicide unit, we have had 18 guilties, only 3 not guilties. That's an 86% conviction rate. Our felony division, 187 guilties, 8 not guilties. That's a 96% felony conviction rate. Our gun violence enforcement division, 136 guilties, 7 not guilties, 95% conviction rate. Our narcotics unit, 375 guilties, 3 not guilties, 99% conviction rate. My attorneys, since the beginning of this year, have indicted over 123 homicides, 591 felonies. Our gun violence enforcement division, when we talk about getting guns off the streets of Baltimore, they have had 335 indictments. Our narcotics unit has had 866 indictments. I tell you this today because I stand by the work of my office. I'll provide the governor anything he desires because I know how much my prosecutors do for this city. Just this week, James Phillips was found guilty of 2 counts of assault in the first degree, 2 counts of use of a firearm in the commission of a crime of violence and associated charges. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison following his August 19th conviction. Phillips shot and struck 2 brothers on Bel Air Road outside of the deli after an altercation occurred inside the store. Just yesterday, Ward Alston, 46 years old, pled guilty to second-degree rape of a 14-year-old girl and was sentenced to 20 years, suspended over 12 years, and 5 years probation. Alston followed the teen from a train station near Mondawmin to her bus, got off at her bus stop to pull her into an alley and to rape her. My prosecutors work every single day. And for the governor to come out today and say that my prosecutors, they don't do their jobs, that they don't prosecute violent criminals, that they don't sweat blood and tears for the safety of everyone in this city is a disgraceful lie. My prosecutors take violent crime seriously, and so do I. I met with the devastated daughter whose mother was killed in a church last week. When I leave here today, I'm going to meet with a 13-year-old girl that was killed last week. That little girl was my baby. She was a part of my Great Expectations program that focuses on children in city schools. And for the governor to put on a show today and to exploit the very real pain of our city residents as part of his political stunt is disgraceful and unacceptable. Anyone who thinks that the governor truly cares about the crime in the city of Baltimore should also ask the question, of how he's been unwilling to develop a long-term solutions to address the root causes of crime in our city. Why did he cancel the red line, which would have provided job opportunities to residents of our city? Why did he veto the Kerwin Commission that would have provided equity and education for our babies? Why is his only solution to crime more police and mandatory minimum sentence? And now he's advocating to refund the police in a city where a 163-page Department of Justice report outlined a pattern and practice of discriminatory enforcement, where there's a history of mistrust following one of the largest police corruption scandals in the history of this country, where officers were literally planting guns and drugs on the residents of our city for decades. And by the way, Mr. Governor, we are under a federal consent decree. The hypocrisy of campaigning to refund the police while defunding prosecutors is not lost on the citizens of Baltimore City. He's attacking me yet again, disrespecting me yet again. As the twice elected representative of the people of Baltimore, the way he always has, because he's entitled. His entitlement and his privilege allows him to do so, as he plays to the right-wing conservatives he's interested in appealing to for election purposes. Today was not about fixing Baltimore. It was about Larry Hogan's political aspirations. He's running on a platform of a modern-day Republican, so he has to be opposed to criminal justice reform. He's perfectly okay with locking up black people for things that white people do in this country with impunity. He's especially okay with villainizing the black woman prosecutor who's challenging the status quo. We're seeing these antics all across the country. Don't be fooled. In Missouri, the governor and friend of Hogan blocked a black progressive prosecutor from exonerating an innocent black man. In Florida, the governor took cases away from a black prosecutor who refused to prosecute the death penalty. This is the company that Larry Hogan keeps. This is his playbook. I come to you today, Baltimore, to say, let's stop getting played by this lame duck, Governor. Thank you. Questions?
Madam Prosecutor, passionate response to the governor. You are obviously taking it personally. You said that he's attacking you. And regarding the governor's obvious criticism, from your point of view, obvious criticism of your current prosecution policies, and you just touched on it, what can you say to make people think, the city of Baltimore think, that your current policies are in fact working?
So again,
over 300 homicides.
I think what's important for us to understand is that there's been this negative misinformation that's being perpetuated by certain media outlets, as well as the top of the state that's leading this, and that is the governor. At the end of the day, at no point have I ever said that I'm not prosecuting violent crime or victim crimes in the city of Baltimore. What I have said and gone on the record is said that there are minor offenses that have nothing to do with public safety. That has been backed up by reports from Johns Hopkins researchers that we will not prosecute minor offenses. I'm not talking about violent carjackings and armed robberies and murders. I just gave you the statistics that show every single day it has been proven my prosecutors are underpaid and overworked, and every single day get into these courtrooms and fight for the citizens of Baltimore. And when you are unjustly attacked, knowing the commitment and the sacrifice that they do every single day, I have a right to be offended.
Madam Prosecutor, what is your reaction to the governor's threat of withholding funding? Most of it is in the form of grants, and does he have the legal authority to even do that?
So what he can do is he can withhold funding. The problem is that we already provided him the data that he just got up here and grandstanded about. He gets that information. So the data that he's requesting is, again, the information that's already on our website and the information that we're required to provide because these are grant funds. So this political grandstanding is really of naught. It's just to come out against me 6 months from my election and or to set him up for his next political aspiration, which we all know is outside the scope of what he's currently doing.
Is there a requirement for your office to provide that to his office directly, or can he just go to your website and get it?
So we provide, because these are grant funds, we already provide that information to the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. That's part of the mandates of these grants. We do this already. And so the information that he's seeking is something that we already report. I just got the letter after his press conference asking for additional items that he wants to make contingent upon further funding. And what I'm saying is that's easy. I'm willing to provide that. As a matter of fact, we already provide it on our website for all citizens to look at.
Oh, can you give us some details about what those things are that you guys are required to provide to him? Because some of the things he listed today was how many people are you guys giving deals to? What are you choosing to prosecute or not prosecute? So what is your office required to give to the governor's office?
So I can get back to you on the exact requirements of each of the grants. It's going to be different in every sort of grant. But I can tell you the information that we publish on our website is our STET and no pros. We give the justifications for why our cases are dismissed. We provide our guilty findings, our not guilty findings. And so you'll find all of that conviction data, no pros, STET data, and the rationale data on our website. We are very intentional about being transparent and accountable to the citizens of Baltimore.
One last thing for me, Madam Prosecutor. You mentioned that you're going over to Maria Turner's family's home
I am.
later today. I met with them yesterday. And I also met with Ms. Claire's family. And they told me, this is what they are expressing, that in their words, crime is out of control in the city. They mentioned you and the mayor coming by, Ms. Turner mentioned you and the mayor coming by their home and everything. What do you tell those families regarding how your policies are working, what you're doing to make them feel safe? You just outlined what you're telling the governor and so forth. What do you say to those
So
families?
I think I've already said it, Keith. I mean, I just gave you the stats, right? Our overall felony conviction rate is 97%. My homicide prosecutors, we've had 18 guilties and only 3 not guilties. We are fighting for the citizens of Baltimore City every single day. Understanding and recognizing that we are a stakeholder in attempting to ensure that we are addressing public safety issues in the city of Baltimore. I've worked with 4 mayors and 5 police commissioners. That type of instability should not exist in any organization, corporation, whatever it may be, agency, right? It's unproductive. Even still, I am committed. I have a partner with the mayor. I am partnered with the police commissioner, and we're going to do everything within our power to address these issues. But when it comes to these policies, we have to debunk this misinformation that is being perpetuated, that because we're not prosecuting the black kid on the corner for trespassing, that's the same kid that's going out and shooting people. Johns Hopkins has already put out a report and said that there's a less than 1% recidivism rate. So the individuals that are committing another offense are not the individuals that are the trigger pullers. What we have to get a tackle on, and this is what the commissioner, the mayor, and myself all agree, is that we should be focusing and reprioritizing our resources. So we are focusing on violent crime so that we can increase the clearance rate. It should be unacceptable that 3 out of 4 murderers still are out on the streets wreaking havoc in our communities. One of the things that I proposed to the governor 2 years ago was exactly what he talked about today, which was bring in the state police. Let's assist Baltimore Police Department to ensure that we're increasing the clearance rate, the solve rate in these homicides and non-fatal shootings. Because what we deal with is a lack of victim-witness cooperation every single day in the city of Baltimore. 30% of the cases that we've had to drop in the previous years, not now, because again, we've been out of court for 18 months. 30% of those cases were due to a lack of victim-witness cooperation. And so what we're saying is that I am very much dedicated and committed to ensuring that the community understands the importance of their role in trying to change the trajectory of what's happening. It's unacceptable that we don't have anybody stepping up in these cases, right? 13-year-olds getting shot, a 69-year-old being killed in a church. We have to work together, and that's what this should be all about. I am committed to even working with this governor. I'm more than happy to set aside my discontent with what he's done and his grandstanding and political theatrics for the betterment of our city.
I want to ask you some questions about the funding issue. You mentioned that he has defunded money for your prosecutors. Can you give us some details on that? Like, what does that actual figure look like, and how does it translate into what you're unable to do?
So what he's attempted to do, and he's introducing the legislation that he's been pushing for the past 2 years, that the city delegation has pretty much said, no, we're not going to move forward on, is he's attempting to get around me, right? And he doesn't like my philosophical sort of policy positions. And so what he wants to do, his only solution to crime is the tough on crime, more police, mandatory minimum sentences. That's one of the requests that he wants us to know. How many times have you utilized the mandatory minimum sentences, right? And so he's attempting to circumvent me, and what he's asked the legislature to do is to put more money towards Brian Frosch so that they can replicate my office and Brian Frosch's office. The problem that's happened is that with the legislature, the police reform proposals, they gave Brian Frosch the ability to create a replication of police-involved shootings, right? So he has his own unit. The problem is that guess what happens? I now have Brian Frosch pulling from what? The best, the brightest, most skilled, talented prosecutors in the entire country that come out of Baltimore City. Brian Frosch is taking my prosecutors. We have 4 state attorneys that come out of this office that are now pulling from my prosecutors: Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Harford County, right? And Prince George's County. All of my colleagues, but they know where to get the talent, which is why I'm so offended. Do not say that we are not committed to doing our jobs when my prosecutors are underpaid, as was determined from the city HR. My prosecutors are underpaid and overworked and get out here every single day to do this work because they're committed to the citizens of this city.
So are people jumping ship? Are people jumping ship because they're not getting paid as much here? And
So
they're going
nobody's
somewhere
jumping
else?
ship. I can tell you that my prosecutors have been directly solicited, right, by other counties that are going to pay them more, that are going to give them less of a headache when it comes to going in front of some of these judges and having the volume of cases in which they do. So yes, they're being directly solicited, and some of them have gone. But I think that I have a great team around me, and we're always recruiting mission-oriented prosecutors. People from all across the country want to work in this office, and so I'm grateful for that. And we're doing perfectly okay, as you can see from the data and from our conviction numbers.
So what happens?
Do you think it's people forgot how folks used to be just pulled up walking down the street, sitting on the steps, their own steps? It was a bad time then when you didn't do anything bad and you was being stopped, asked for ID, and you didn't do any crime, but you was being put in jail for weeks until you was cleared. I mean, your mission was to correct some of that, right?
So I can tell you that the basis for my policies is this, right? I made a determination. I sat down with public health experts before I came to a decision about my policies, and we were attempting to ensure that we could decrease the engagement of law enforcement and individuals that would be cycled inside of the facilities in the jail. Coming out of the global pandemic, what we understood and we recognized is that we didn't know how long this was going to go. It ended up going 18 months. Our first jury trial, the courts were closed down for more than 18 months. The first jury trial wasn't until July. We knew we were going to have a backlog of cases, and we needed to prioritize those cases. So we said, okay, after we consulted public health experts, what should we do to ensure that we're prioritizing our cases? And we're ensuring that we're not increasing the risk to the greater community and to the police officers when it comes to this pandemic. So we consulted them. We looked all across the country. We said, we're going to look at these minor offenses that have nothing to do with public safety, that we believed in theory had nothing to do with public safety, right? Trespassing, open container, drug use, drug possession, not drug dealing, drug possession. We prosecute drug dealing in the city of Baltimore. But I'm talking about drug use, right? We said, in theory, these are the offenses that we should not be focusing on during this global pandemic. And what we found, we quashed or eliminated 1,400 warrants. We dismissed over 1,400 cases, pending cases. And what we saw in that year is that what we thought in theory was all actuality, right? And I say this because Johns Hopkins did research, And what they found was that there was, once again, less than a 1% recidivism rate. The individuals that were the target population were not the individuals that were committing subsequent offenses, let alone violent offenses. So that was confirmed. There's no public safety value. 2, we wanted to prioritize our resources. I was able to abolish district court prosecutors and then create an opportunity to ensure that my homicide unit was staffed up, right? That we were able to reallocate and redistribute the resources within my office so that we can focus on violent crime. That's the third and probably one of the most important reasons I made a determination about stop prosecuting these minor offenses that had nothing to do with public safety. It's because for far too long we've had this false sort of expectation that the police is supposed to respond to every social ill in society. What that has meant to the city of Baltimore, which was outlined in the pattern and practice of discriminatory enforcement, which outlined in the 163-page Department of Justice report, was that these laws, these minor offenses that had nothing to do with public safety, were actually being discriminately enforced against black and brown people in our city. And so we saw that when we were during the global pandemic. These minor offenses for black people in this country can actually lead to a death sentence. Whether you're making eye contact with police in a high crime neighborhood and you decide to run, like Freddie Gray, or you're Eric Garner, where you are allegedly selling loose cigarettes, or George Floyd, where you're alleged to have passed a counterfeit bill during a global pandemic for groceries, or Dante Wright, who either had air fresheners in his mirror or an expired tag, and I'm sad to say so did I during the global pandemic because the Motor Vehicle Association, it was closed. So what I said as the state's attorney, understanding those 3 sort of factors, no public safety value is counterproductive to the very limited resources that we have in law enforcement, and that these laws are being discriminately enforced against black and brown people, I will never be complicit in that type of enforcement. And so that's the reason.
Defunding police, Madam State's Attorney, you had mentioned the consent decree earlier. Where do you stand on that? Do you believe in defunding the police?
So the consent decree and defunding the police are 2 different issues. The consent decree, I absolutely believe that we should be reforming the police department, especially if anyone has read the 163-page Department of Justice report that outlines the pattern of practice of discriminatory enforcement. I think, yes, it's very much necessary. With regard to defunding the police, I'm not of the opinion that we need to defund the police. What I'm saying is that we're not going to be doing what we've always done, which is to this hypocritical campaign of refunding the police and defunding my office. That makes absolutely no sense.
I want to follow up on that.
That's
the last question. Can you just mention quickly, what are the consequences if this funding is actually pulled from your office?
And if I can jump on that, do we have a sense of how much funding we're talking about from the governor's or from the
So
state?
we have several grants from the governor's office, and as I stated, each of the grants that we have require a different sort of, there's a condition to each of the grants. As I stated before, we are more than happy to provide whatever information that he's now requiring to provide us the funding. But we can get you all of that data outside of this press conference.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Madam